Hi, we're Quaint and Curious Volumes. My name is James. Today is Friday, and I wanted to talk about rereads. My friend Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads did a video earlier this week where he talked about 12 books that he has read and is looking forward to rereading in the near future. Of course, it got me thinking about books that I've read and that I would like to reread. And I thought I would show you some of those, and I would also raise some questions about some later ones, um, about alternatives to rereading books, and let me know what you think. But I'll start off with a few books that I have read, definitely, and would like to reread. This is a book that I have read one time. It is called Master of Reality by John Darnielle. It is a 33 and a third book. This is different from what I often talk about. Well, I frequently find myself talking about John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats on this channel. Um, but this is part of a series, if you're not familiar, 33 and a third, of very short books about particular pop music albums. Usually they're pop or rock or country, but an album, back for yeah, so a collection of songs by a musical artist, and usually they're written by music critics, and they explore the sound, the making of, the cultural impact of that particular album. So, obviously there are ones on like Sergeant Pepper's and things like that. And this is about the Black Sabbath album, Master of Reality. And John Darnielle, as I said, he is the lead singer of the Mountain Goats, and he also writes novels. This was his first book. And he takes a very different approach to talking about the Black Sabbath album, Master of Reality, because this is essentially a novel told from the standpoint of a teenager, a young man who is involuntarily committed, if in a psychiatric facility, and he's talking about his love for this album and also what led to him getting committed, what he's planning to do when he gets out, what he thinks about life and music and other things. So this is really fascinating. It's 100 pages, really well written. The print is minuscule, but there you go. The next one, this is a book I have read probably more times than any other book. Don't judge me. It is Dubliners by James Joyce. Also kind of a short book. For some reason, I always like to reacquaint myself with these miserable Irish people. I don't have any Irish heritage or anything like that. This was the first Joyce I read for a long time. It was the only Joyce I read. It's for most people probably the only Joyce you really need to read. But they're, the stories, they're compact. They open up a whole world of things. In the Penguin Classic, there's a lot of notes that explain a lot of the Catholic stuff gets explained, which if you grow up Catholic, you don't need that much of it. But some of the things about Irish history, for example, there's a story called Ivy Day in the Committee Room, in which one of the characters has a leaf of ivy on his pinned to his lapel, I think. And at a certain point, he points to it in a conversation and says, "If he was still around, we wouldn't be talking about this." And then they go on, and everyone in the story understands what that means. But if you're not involved in Irish politics in 1916, you don't know what that means. So it's helpful sometimes to get some old notes. Anyway, aside from that, you know, these characters you won't forget. You won't forget them, and I always like to revisit them. I think my favorites, like a lot of people, I like Araby, like The Dead. Counterparts. Well, that's a miserable one, but I'll never forget that one. Okay. let's see, what else? I have Virginia Woolf's The Waves. I think this was her last novel. It's generally considered one of her, maybe her most experimental ones. I have a feeling, I always find Woolf to be rewarding but very slow going. I read this over probably 4 weeks, going very slowly, and I think revisiting it, having had the whole experience, would make the the relation of the parts to the whole to the parts to the whole. It would make it probably even more revealing and enlightening. So that is that. All right, no, this is a book that I have read once and I really loved, and I've been meaning to get back to it again ever since. It is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I read this probably about 5 years ago. And it's a book that seems to often be paired with Richard Wright's Native Son, because they were written about the same around the same time, I think. And they're both, weighty books about the African American experience. Invisible Man, I find, is not just an important book about the African American experience, but it's just a great read, and entertaining, darkly funny. I mean, I find this book very funny, but it's dark humor, from beginning almost to the end. There's a lot of pathos. There's a lot of tragedy in it, and satire. It's got everything in it. So, yes, this is one that I very much would like to read, and I hope it doesn't let me down, because I've been saying how great it is. All right, this is one I've read a couple of times, and I always want to reread it. It is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Another book that has a whole world in it. Well, no women, but it's it's just fantastic. I first read it when I was in my 20s. I second read it when I was about 50, and I want to read it again, and maybe again. I don't know. There's a writer named Yian Li, who early in the pandemic led a group on Twitter, I think it was, and also on some kind of blog site, where they read War and Peace over a period of several months. Where I think they read about 10 pages a day, and this writer had read War and Peace alternating with Moby Dick over and over and over again. And her practice is just to read one chapter a day every day. And then when she gets to the end of War and Peace, she reads one chapter a day, Moby Dick, and then goes back to War. And she reads other things, of course, but that's kind of a thing that she does and finds very rewarding. So you can always find something new to find in Moby Dick or War and Peace. Also, this writer, she grew up in China, so English is not her first language, but she writes and publishes in English, and I've read some of her short stories. They're very good. Anyway, now I get to kind of the question part, because I've got some more books that I want to talk about, and ask if it's better to reread that book that you're thinking of, or to read something else by that author. Does it make more sense in some cases, right? So for Ralph Ellison, this is his only major work. There was the posthumous novel. I never hear anyone talk about it, so I don't think I'm interested, right? For Virginia Woolf, she has a lot of other works that I could read, but this is kind of clearly the one I want to read. Here's one, though. Another undertaking book, right? Some of them, rereading Dubliners won't take up most of a month. Rereading The Magic Mountain is going to take a while, right? This is going to take a month to read. I would like to reread The Magic Mountain because it's amazing. But there's also Buddenbrooks, which would take me about the same amount of time. I'm sorry, it's very dim in here. Let me see if I can do anything about that. Buddenbrooks, by the same author, Thomas Mann. This was his first big success. It was specifically mentioned in his Nobel Prize award. And I think they're both often held up as the best example of his work. It's not like I'm like, maybe I should read Joseph and his brothers, so I really want to read this, but I also want to read this for the first time. So what makes most sense to you? Here's another one, less of an undertaking, admittedly, but Willa Cather's My Antonia, a fantastic novel of the Midwest, the American plains, and immigrants from I think it was Bohemia, and there's also some Russian immigrants. There's a wild story that some Russian immigrants tell in here. Would really like to reread this. That won't take too long. It's not a terribly long book. But I also have The Professor's House by Willa Cather, which is considered to be a pretty fantastic read. Read a new one or reread an old one? That's the question that I have for you. And I had another such pairing, which is Dostoevsky, and I have no Dostoevsky in the house. There's no Dostoevsky in this house, by God, no. I just don't happen to have any. But I would very much like to reread Crime and Punishment, which I read in high school. But there's also so many other important Dostoevsky novels, probably the chief one being Brothers Karamazov, that I haven't read. Does it make more sense to read one of those or to reread Crime and Punishment? Crime and Punishment I read so long ago and have forgotten so much of. I mean, I know kind of the broad outlines. I know Raskolnikov and some of his issues. But, I mean, I've forgotten so much of it that it's almost as if I haven't read it at all. So that's my question. What choices do you make in such a situation? Does that kind of thing trouble you at all? Anyway, thank you for watching. Reminder that we have Chekhovember coming up in November. We're going to be reading 5 works by Anton Chekhov. It's a very moderately paced booktube event. You won't be unduly burdened by having to read too much. I think it'll be easy for a lot of people to keep up with and participate if you're interested in reading 2 plays and 3 stories by the great Russian writer Anton Chekhov in the month of November. I have a video up on it. My friends Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads, Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics are all co-hosting. It should be fun. And check that out if you are interested. If not, that's okay. We can still be friends. Thank you for watching. Bye.